The ballroom glittered like a palace. Crystal chandeliers poured light onto the polished marble floor where the city's wealthiest swayed in gowns and tuxedos. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved through the crowd like shadows, carrying silver trays of champagne. One of them was Marcus Reed, his tray balanced effortlessly in his hand, his posture steady but humble. He kept his eyes down, careful not to draw attention. To these people, he was invisible. That's how he preferred it. Until crash. The crowd gasped as Marcus brushed shoulders with a tall, broad-shouldered man in a velvet jacket. A single glass of champagne tipped, spilling golden liquid onto the man's cuff. The man froze. Then slowly he turned. His diamond cufflinks caught the light. His smile was sharp, the kind that wasn't a smile at all. Jonathan Sterling, the millionaire host of the gala, a man whose name opened doors and shut them just as quickly. He looked Marcus up and down, his voice slicing through the music. Well, well, the help has finally joined the party. Laughter bubbled from a few nearby guests. Cameras lifted. The humiliation had begun. Marcus bowed his head, steadying his tray. My apologies, sir. It won't happen again. But Sterling wasn't finished. He never was. He raised his voice louder, showboating for the crowd. Tell me, boy! Do you even know what a waltz is? Or do they not dance in the kitchens? The ballroom rippled with cruel chuckles. A woman fanned herself, whispering to her friend. Someone recorded on their phone. Marcus said nothing. His silence only made Sterling press harder. He loved an audience. He snapped his fingers. The orchestra paused mid-song. All eyes turned. Here's a thought, Sterling declared, lifting his champagne glass as if making a toast. If you can dance this waltz, you marry my daughter. The words dropped like glass shattering across the marble. At first, laughter. Loud, merciless, filling the room. A waiter marry Sterling's daughter? A joke. A humiliation wrapped as entertainment. Sterling's daughter, seated near the stage, flushed red with embarrassment. She lowered her gaze, mortified by her father's cruelty. The crowd leaned in, hungry. Phones were out. This was no longer a gala. It was a spectacle. Marcus stood perfectly still, his breathing steady. His fingers flexed once on the tray, then stilled. Everyone waited for him to stammer, to back away, to escape into the shadows. Instead, Marcus lifted his head. His eyes met Sterling's, calm, unshaken. And in a voice soft but steady, he said, "Play the music." Silence fell like a curtain. The orchestra exchanged uncertain glances. The guests froze mid-laugh. Sterling blinked, stunned that the servant hadn't crumbled. Then, slowly, the conductor raised his baton. Strings hummed to life. The first notes of the waltz floated into the air. The crowd leaned forward, whispering. Is he serious? He'll make a fool of himself. This is going to be good. But Marcus simply set down his tray on a nearby table. His hands, freed at last, moved with quiet confidence. He stepped forward. Onto the marble floor, into the light. The violins lifted the air with elegance, smooth and mocking at the same time. Sterling leaned back against the edge of the stage, one hand in his pocket, the other swirling his champagne as if this were already a comedy show for his entertainment. The crowd murmured in gleeful anticipation. Watch him trip over his own feet. He probably doesn't even know the steps. This will be priceless. Marcus stood in the center of the marble floor alone. His shoulders straight, his chin level. No tuxedo, no polished shoes, just a waiter's uniform and steady eyes. For a moment, he didn't move. He simply breathed, slow, even, unshaken. Sterling raised his voice again, pulling laughter from the guests. Come now, boy. Show us your kitchen waltz. Or are you waiting for a mop as your partner? More laughter. Phones angled closer. A few guests clapped mockingly in rhythm with the music, trying to throw Marcus off before he began. And then he moved. A single step, smooth, balanced, deliberate. His shoes slid across the marble with a quiet grace, the kind that didn't belong to a man fumbling. It belonged to someone who knew. The first whispers rippled through the front rows. "Wait, did you see that?" "No." That could have been luck. Marcus's arms extended, not flamboyantly but with precision, like an artist sketching the opening line of a masterpiece. He turned once, his posture regal, his footwork impossibly clean. The laughter wavered. Sterling's smirk froze for a fraction of a second. He masked it quickly with a louder scoff. "Don't get too comfortable. Even a dog can stumble into rhythm once." But his words rang thinner now, clashing against the silence that had begun to creep over the ballroom. Marcus's movements gathered momentum. His frame expanded, his turns sharp but controlled. Each step caught the light, as if the marble itself bowed to his timing. The clapping mockers in the back stopped clapping. A woman in a sequined dress leaned forward, whispering to her friend. "This isn't random. That's technique." The violin swelled. Marcus spun, his jacket fanning just enough to brush the air like silk. Every beat matched, every gesture painted. His body spoke a language most in the room had forgotten, a language of elegance, discipline, and art. And yet, his face remained calm. No arrogance, no smug grin, just focus. Sterling's daughter, who had been staring at the floor moments earlier, lifted her eyes. For the first time, she looked at Marcus, truly looked. The embarrassment on her face began to shift into something else. Awe. The crowd shifted in their seats. A strange energy replaced the laughter. Confusion, intrigue, uneasy silence. Sterling, sensing the change, barked louder. "Don't be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. He's just rehearsed a few tricks. Watch closely, he'll trip! He will trip!" But Marcus did not falter. He swept through the next pattern as though the orchestra itself followed his lead, his every step guiding the music instead of chasing it. And then, he executed a turn so sharp, so fluid, that even the professional dancers stationed at the edge of the room gasped quietly. The guests noticed. Heads turned, eyebrows raised. The cruel amusement was dissolving into reluctant attention. Marcus hadn't even begun to show his full mastery. But already the balance of power in the room had shifted, if only by a fraction. And for the first time that night, Jonathan Sterling's laugh didn't come. The violins rose higher, and with them, Marcus's movements deepened. What began as cautious curiosity in the crowd had transformed into a strange, hushed awe. He crossed the floor with sweeping precision, his lines crisp, his frame impeccable. No stumble, no hesitation, just elegance, as though the marble was his natural stage. The guests leaned in. Fans stopped mid-wave. Laughter, once constant, had evaporated completely. A man in a navy tuxedo whispered to his neighbor, his voice barely audible but sharp enough to slice the silence. "That's not beginner's luck. That's training." Another voice from behind. "I've seen this style before." "But where—" Sterling's jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened against the stem of his champagne glass. He barked again, louder, desperate. "He's just imitating what he's seen in movies. Any fool can twirl around if they watch long enough." But the tone no longer matched the room. He was shouting against a current that had turned against him. Marcus, unbothered, pivoted into a flawless natural turn, sweeping past Sterling's daughter. The girl gasped softly, not from embarrassment now, but from sheer disbelief. Her eyes followed him, her father noticed. His smirk thinned into something uglier. Unease. The orchestra surged. Marcus advanced into a closed change, a movement so smooth, so precise, that even the hired professionals along the wall exchanged glances. One of them muttered under his breath, "That's championship form." The whisper spread. Championship, form, a ripple through the crowd. Skepticism cracking into realization. Sterling felt the shift. He snapped his fingers at the musicians. "Faster! Faster!" he commanded, his voice tight. The violin sped up, the rhythm doubling. It was meant to sabotage, to trip Marcus, to force his mask to slip. But Marcus didn't stumble. He thrived. His feet quickened with machine-like precision. His turns grew sharper, his hold stronger. Each motion snapped in perfect time, as if his veins carried the rhythm itself. The faster the music ran, the more his brilliance shone. Gasps broke out across the ballroom. One older woman clutched her pearls. Dear God, he's not just keeping up, he's leading it. And in that instant, the first flashback spark ignited. A guest leaned closer to another, whispering urgently, "Wait, isn't that the Reed boy? The one who vanished after the accident?" The words were faint, half heard in the crowd, but they hit like lightning. A few faces stiffened with dawning memory. A name, a story, something once whispered in dance circles, a prodigy who had disappeared. Sterling froze. He heard it too, but Marcus danced on. His face calm, his body flawless, his silence deafening. He didn't acknowledge the whispers. He didn't need to. His movement spoke louder than names ever could. Sterling's laughter was gone now. In its place, sweat at his temple. His champagne glass trembled. He forced a smile, clapping mockingly, but his eyes betrayed panic. Marcus's final spin of the sequence ended with a perfect hold, his frame steady as stone, his gaze calm and unshaken. The room erupted, not in laughter this time, but in applause. Hesitant at first, then swelling, overtaking the music itself. And Sterling's daughter? She was standing now, her hand over her mouth, eyes locked on Marcus in disbelief. For the first time in the night, the crowd wasn't laughing at the waiter. They were beginning to believe in him. The ballroom felt different now. The music still played, but every breath, every whisper, every clink of glass had gone quiet. Marcus moved like a shadow of something greater, a man stepping not just to rhythm, but to destiny. His frame expanded, his presence filled the hall. Each rise and fall of his steps flowed like water, yet cut sharp like a blade. The crowd leaned forward as one. No laughter, no jokes, just the sound of disbelief shifting into awe. Sterling's smile had cracked. The sweat at his temple glistened under the chandelier lights. His daughter's gaze lingered on Marcus like she was seeing light through glass for the first time. And then, Marcus executed a double spin so flawless that even the orchestra faltered for half a beat, musicians stealing glances at him instead of their sheet music. The silence in the room broke into a wave of astonished gasps. From the corner, an older guest muttered under his breath, the words slipping into the air like a prophecy. Reed. Heads turned. Faces stiffened. The whispers grew louder. That's him! Marcus Reed, the prodigy. He disappeared after the accident. Everyone thought he quit forever. Sterling's eyes snapped wide. His fingers tightened around his glass until it cracked, champagne spilling down his cuff. He shook his head violently. No, impossible. He's just a waiter. A nobody. But the truth had already taken root. The orchestra swelled. And with it, the flashback ignited. Flashback sequence. Marcus. Younger, barely 20, in a glittering ballroom years ago. Lights brighter, the crowd bigger, but the same hush of awe surrounding him. His posture immaculate, his confidence radiating. A trophy gleaming at the edge of the stage. His parents clapping in the front row. Then, the flash of headlines. Young black champion stuns world stage. Marcus Reed, the future of ballroom dance. But quickly the montage shifted darker. A sudden tragedy. His mother's illness. Medical bills piling higher than the trophies he'd won. Competitions abandoned. Costumes pawned. Applause replaced with silence. And then the uniform. The waiter's tray. The quiet jobs no one noticed. Back to present. The ballroom guests stared at Marcus now as though seeing the ghost of that prodigy reborn. Every step he made on Sterling's marble floor was not just a dance. It was a resurrection. Sterling's hand trembled as he tried to raise his voice over the music. Enough! This is just theatrics. Don't let him trick you! But even as he spoke, Marcus executed a flawless contra-check, his frame tilting in perfect balance, his control so absolute that Sterling's words died in his throat. The applause started again. Louder, firmer, undeniable. And then came the voice that silenced everything. The outsider ally, a respected politician seated in the front, leaned forward. His tone was calm, commanding, absolute. That is championship dancing. I've seen him compete. I know that form anywhere. The words were a hammer strike. The whispers became shouts. The crowd erupted in stunned agreement. Phones were lifted high, recording the spectacle that no one wanted to forget. Sterling's daughter rose slowly from her chair, her eyes locked on Marcus. Awe softened into admiration, respect, perhaps even something more. Sterling's chest heaved. He looked around the room, desperate for support. But the faces that once laughed with him now stared at him with disgust, with judgment. Marcus spun once more, coming to a poised halt at the center of the floor. His eyes lifted, calm, steady, unbroken. The crowd thundered. And Sterling. His voice cracked as he shouted into the storm, "He's still nothing! Just a servant!" But no one laughed with him anymore. The chandeliers glittered above like 1,000 judging eyes, but all focus was locked on Marcus at the center of the floor. His movements, precise and fluid, had transformed the ballroom into his stage. Every beat, every turn, every line of his body commanded the room's silence. Sterling, trembling now, refused to accept defeat. His voice, once booming with confidence, cracked with desperation. "Faster! Play faster!" he barked at the orchestra. "Drown him out!" The musicians hesitated, eyes darting nervously toward Marcus, then to the crowd. But Sterling snapped his jeweled fingers and the tempo surged again, violins racing, piano pounding, rhythm quickening to a fever pitch. It was sabotage. No amateur could possibly keep up. But Marcus wasn't an amateur. He welcomed it. His feet answered the storm with lightning precision, his body floating yet sharp, carving the tempo into perfection. Each step struck like a declaration. "I am still here. I never left." The crowd gasped. Applause broke through the music mid-dance, scattered but unstoppable. Sterling's voice cut through, frantic now. "Slip, boy! Slip! Show them you're nothing!" But Marcus didn't slip. Instead, he unleashed a flurry of spins and syncopated steps, his frame unshaken, his balance immaculate. The faster the music thundered, the more unstoppable he became. Sweat gleamed at his temple, but his breathing stayed calm, steady. And then, with a sudden surge of power, he executed a grand finale lift and dip, not with a partner, but solo. A move so impossibly controlled that the professionals on the sidelines instinctively rose to their feet. His jacket swept the marble like wings. His body froze mid-dip at a perfect angle, the music slamming into silence right as he did. The ballroom erupted. Applause roared, thundering off the high ceilings. Guests leapt to their feet, shouting, cheering, clapping in disbelief. Sterling's daughter pressed her hands to her mouth, tears shining in her eyes. She whispered into the chaos, though only she could hear herself. "Incredible." And then the outsider ally rose, his voice booming above the cheers. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed a master, Marcus Reed, the champion himself." The name detonated like fireworks. Phones shot higher, flashes lit the room. The viral moment had been born right there on marble floors, in the ruins of Sterling's arrogance. Sterling stumbled backward, his champagne glass shattering against the floor. His lips trembled, but no words came. His once faithful guests looked at him now not with respect, but with scorn. One sneered openly. "Mocked him? You mocked him?" Another shook her head. "Arrogant fool!" He humiliated himself. Sterling's hands shook as his daughter turned toward Marcus. Her eyes glimmered not with embarrassment anymore, but admiration. pride, perhaps even love. Sterling's heart dropped. He had not just lost control of the room, he had lost everything. And Marcus? He did not gloat. He did not laugh. He only bowed his head, calm and dignified, before turning to exit the floor. The applause followed him like a wave, drowning Sterling in shame. The gala was no longer Sterling's. The music had ended, but the thunder of applause still echoed through the ballroom like a storm that refused to pass. Everywhere faces were alight, phones recording, guests whispering and laughing, shaking their heads in disbelief. But the whispers were no longer about Marcus being an outsider. They were about Sterling's downfall. Imagine mocking him. He was a champion all along. Sterling's lost his touch. What a fool. Sterling's cheeks burned crimson under the chandeliers. His hands trembled as he jabbed his finger toward Marcus, who was calmly stepping off the dance floor. "Don't clap for him. He's nothing but grease under his nails. A mechanic!" The words rang out desperate, hollow. The applause only grew louder, drowning him. For the first time in years, Sterling was invisible in his own empire. His daughter, however, was not. She stepped forward from the cluster of shocked onlookers. Her gown shimmered beneath the lights as she moved, and slow, deliberate, unwavering. Her eyes, fixed on Marcus, carried a fire Sterling had never seen in her before. "Father," she said, her voice strong enough to pierce the noise. "If he is nothing, then what does that make you?" Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Sterling's mouth fell open, but no words came. She turned to Marcus then, her voice softer, but every guest could hear it. "You were extraordinary." "You are extraordinary." Marcus bowed his head slightly, his chest rising with controlled breath. He had not come for praise. He had not come for vengeance. He had only danced because they dared to doubt him. The outsider ally, grinning wide, thrust his phone in the air. "Already trending worldwide," he announced. On his screen, Marcus's final spin froze mid-motion, captions screaming across feeds. "Waiter? Mechanic? No, champion!" CEO humiliated by Black Dance Master Liv. The waltz heard around the world. The ballroom erupted again. This time not in performance, but in history being born. Sterling staggered backward, his glass shoes of arrogance shattering beneath him. Everything he'd built, his prestige, his control, his image, had been ripped away by a man he thought beneath him. He collapsed into a chair, his breathing shallow. No one offered him comfort. Not a single guest moved to his side. The spotlight was no longer his. It belonged to Marcus. The crowd surged forward, hands reaching out, cameras flashing, voices praising. Some called him Sir, others begged for a picture, a handshake. And Marcus, humble even in his triumph, offered each a nod, a smile, a word of thanks. Sterling's daughter stood among them, her hand clutching her heart. For the first time in her life, she was proud of someone other than her father. As Marcus moved toward the exit, she called out softly, but it carried across the room. "Wait!" He turned. Their eyes met, hers filled with gratitude, awe, and something deeper. His calm but unreadable. She did not need to say more. The entire ballroom understood. Sterling had mocked Marcus with a wager, a cruel, thoughtless promise that if he danced the waltz, he could marry his daughter. But in that moment, with the world watching, the choice was no longer Sterling's. It was hers, and she had made it. Epilogue. Hook. By morning, the video had crossed 10 million views. By noon, Marcus's name was trending on every platform. By evening, Sterling's empire was bleeding clients, investors pulling out, and the headline that echoed across the world: CEO mocked a mechanic, but the Black Dance champion stole his stage and his legacy. By the next morning, the ballroom had vanished into legend, but legends didn't stay hidden. They spread, and Marcus's name was now everywhere. The clip of his flawless waltz, performed under the mocking challenge of a millionaire CEO, had crossed 10 million views before sunrise. By the time Marcus stepped out of his modest apartment with grease still on his hands from an early morning repair job, the world had already decided who he was. Not a waiter, not the mechanic, but a champion reborn. Cafe TVs replayed his dance in slow motion, commentators arguing if his form was better than the champions of Europe. Teenagers mimicked his spin on TikTok, pairing it with captions like, "Never underestimate the underdog." Everywhere Marcus walked, heads turned. Strangers whispered his name, some bold enough to approach with a phone out asking, "Are you the guy from the gala?" He nodded humbly each time, offering a small smile. Fame had found him, but it was never what he had sought. Meanwhile, across the city, Sterling's empire cracked. Board members held emergency meetings. Investors pulled their money, wary of being linked to a man mocked across the internet as the CEO who lost to a mechanic. Memes tore him apart, photoshopped images of him pointing and laughing, captioned with his own downfall. His pride had not just cost him respect, it was destroying his fortune. Sterling locked himself in his penthouse, blinds drawn. His phone buzzed endlessly, not with support, but with shame. For the first time, he was the one being laughed at. Back in the world Marcus had always known, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at his workshop. Not an email, not a DM, but an envelope with gilded edges. Inside was a formal invitation. To Marcus Kane, "You are cordially invited to the International Dance Revival Championship." He read it twice. His hands trembled. This was the stage he had once left behind, convinced his life would never allow him back. Now, because of one dance, the world wanted him again, and this time, he wasn't just dancing for trophies. He was dancing for something bigger. Every person who had ever been mocked, dismissed, underestimated. That evening, he found himself standing outside a grand hall again, not Sterling's ballroom, but the home of the championship itself. His heart pounded. Reporters crowded the entrance, cameras flashing. Then, from the crowd, a familiar voice called his name. It was her, Sterling's daughter. She wasn't in a gown now. She wasn't a prize in her father's cruel wager. She was just herself, dressed simply, her hair loose, her expression real. "You came," she said, relief softening her face. He smiled faintly. "I had to. This is what I was meant for." There was silence between them, charged but unspoken. The world had mocked them both in different ways, her as a pawn in her father's pride, him as a man dismissed for his work. And yet standing there they were equals. As the cameras flashed, she stepped closer. "Then don't dance just for them. Dance for you." Marcus nodded, and for the first time in years he felt the weight of the world not as a burden, but as a rhythm waiting to be set free. Inside, as the orchestra prepared, whispers filled the grandstands. "That's him." The black mechanic who destroyed the CEO. The champion who came back. Marcus stood at the edge of the stage, the floor glowing under the lights. He closed his eyes, and then, with a breath steady as steel, he stepped into destiny once more. The legacy was no longer Sterling's. It was his.